Hello, friends and clients of Walker Gates Villa. I am Jennifer Walker Gates, immigration attorney in freezing cold February 2022, Austin, Texas. Everything is closed down today, so we are in our respective homes filming this video for you so that we can continue to get information out to the immigrant community, even though the weather is crazy. With me today is my associate, Diego Nuñez. Hey, Diego.
Hey, Jennifer.
And we are going to be talking about today Vawa for Men. Vawa is the Violence Against Women Act, and it doesn't just apply to women. So this is a really important topic for the immigrant community to understand and know about, because I suspect a lot of men qualify for this benefit but haven't applied for a number of reasons. So before we get into today's topic, please hit subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon so that you're notified when we release new videos. We are going to be updating the immigrant community once a week, at least, about important developments and benefits in immigration law. So we want everyone to stay informed and have the best, most reliable information. So please hit that subscribe button. And Diego, let's just start with the very basics. Can you give us a sense of what is VAWA, how does it work, and what does it do?
So when people refer to VAWA, they're talking about the law that passed that allows people to petition for themselves when they're in an abusive relationship, and it's a self-petition. And primarily, the cases that we see is for spouses, and it's usually the wife, and it's an immigrant wife that is subjected to physical abuse or extreme cruelty on the behalf by her spouse, U.S. citizen or permanent resident. And these cases are the ones where, if you are able to get this petition approved, and if you're otherwise qualified, you can apply for permanent residency without relying on your spouse. And it was passed because of that very nature of the spousal relationship, and the lack of citizenship, immigrant status was used to prolong the abuse and the abusive relationship of the immigrant.
Exactly. Yes. And so when you do qualify, if you do qualify for VAWA protections as an immigrant to the United States, and let's say you entered the country without permission, and then you are expecting your spouse to petition for you to do the consular process. What happens if you are qualified for the VAWA protections? Do you still have to consular process?
No. So if you are approved for VAWA, then you are made. There's an exception in the law that says that despite coming in without status, coming in illegally, then you're able to still seek your permanent residency right here in the United States without having to do the consular process.
Yeah, so that's a really important benefit. And the reason that exception in the law was created was because certain immigrants were returning to their home country to consular process and losing the protection of, the police in the United States or the laws in the United States that protect victims of violence, and they were being subjected to additional abuse, violence, kidnapping, trafficking, etc., in their home countries. So in order to avoid those additional problems, an exception was created in the law. So if you do qualify for VAWA protections and you're otherwise eligible, it allows you to adjust status in the United States without having to leave the United States. So it's a wonderful benefit for those who qualify, to be able to gain some independence, gain some stability, gain some security in their immigration status without having to involve the abusive spouse or parent or child, or yeah, it can be a same-sex spouse or an opposite-sex spouse. So I want to talk today specifically about VAWA for Men, Diego. Is this, even though it's called Violence Against Women Act, it also applies to men. Have you done VAWA cases for men in your practice?
I have. I've probably done dozens of VAWA cases, and I say that out of all of those, only 2 were for men. But I have consulted with men that probably, in the last year, I've probably consulted with 2 that that qualified for the self-petition process of VAWA because of the abuse that they were experiencing with their spouse, with their female spouse, but they were very embarrassed to pursue it. And I think the reason why men don't hire in these cases is because they feel that it makes them be less of a man. They feel emasculated, and
Yeah.
and it's sad because the abuse is real. The psychological trauma, the physical trauma, it's all the same. They're hurting just as much as anybody else would in those circumstances, and often they don't pursue it because they fear of what could happen with the kids, if because they think that the courts would give custody to the mother and they would not be able to see the kids, and if they were deported, they would not be able to see the children. So all these things are things that I've heard from several men, as to why they put up with the abuse and why they don't move forward with a case. And what I try to explain is that the process is confidential, so that it's not something that becomes public. When you're pursuing it, it's not like immigration is going to contact the abusive spouse and release information about the abuse or any of the allegations being made. And so it's a process that it's one of those really decent laws that were passed that really do protect immigrants and it protects families. And that's what I try to explain to men, so that they realize that this is an avenue that they can pursue, and not have to put up with just terrible abuse.
Yeah. It's so interesting because it's, the same for women. There's a lot of, I think, one of the characteristics of abuse and extreme cruelty is that the victim feels like it's their fault in some way and feels very ashamed about what is happening. And that's true, I think, for women and for men. But men have this added kind of cultural expectation that they will be in control in the relationship. And abuse and cruelty, in fact, is always about control. And so if they have sort of lost control in the relationship, then there's this sort of additional cultural stigma that attaches to men. And it takes real strength and real courage for a man to be willing to come forward and make this kind of claim for his own security, safety, and long-term stability. So, Diego, have you ever seen in any VAWA case that you've ever worked on, have you ever seen the perpetrator of abuse suffer any kind of consequence as the result of the survivor or the spouse who is being victimized filing a VAWA case?
No, I have not. And for example, one case that I had about 6 or 7 years ago, the abuser was a permanent resident, and the spouse had called the police, maybe the immigrant spouse had called the police maybe once or twice, but those cases were dismissed. But we were still able to prove that she had been physically abused. Um, there were protective orders, even though the case was ultimately dismissed, even though she remained with him. We were still able to, gather the needed evidence to show that she had been subjected to not just abuse, but extreme cruelty. I mean, there was a lot of control through the finances, and nothing happened to the individual, again because it's confidential, and the spouse still being a permanent resident. um, you know uh, they were not, later investigated and placed in deportation proceedings. Uh,
Right.
and and again, it's because this is supposed to be something that remains confidential. The officers that review these cases are highly trained and understand that information is not to be shared. So no, I've never seen once anyone had any kind of repercussions through the process.
Yes.
Um,
Same for me. Um, this process is about, and I think this warrants its own separate video. The VAWA process is about helping the victim. It is not about doing harm or causing consequences to the perpetrator.
mhm,
It is about liberating the victim and providing the victim with the ability to leave an abusive situation
mhm,
if they choose to do so. It doesn't require that they actually leave,
right.
but it enables them to do so when they're ready. So, Diego, what is the difference? And this is something that I think is really important for the community to understand, and just for the integrity of the VAWA process, because I have unfortunately seen some practitioners really, for lack of a better word, abusing the VAWA process, and filing for people when they're just having like normal marital problems, and calling it extreme cruelty. But what is the difference between normal marital problems where a couple is just like not getting along, they're arguing, they're having trouble, they're having difficulty, they're unhappy, but there's a difference between that and abuse, and extreme cruelty.
Yeah.
Can you articulate what that difference is?
Well, so I think one of the differences is when, the normal, there's the normal marital problems where there might be arguments, disagreements, maybe resentment. Um, when it crosses the line, it's when maybe there is some actual physical lashing out, but also when crimes are being committed. Maybe when there is a lot of fraud, lying, but to the point that it's harming not just the relationship but the individual. Um, and an example that I can give is and this was a male client. His wife, ex-wife at this point, was an addict, and she continuously lied to him. She would steal from them, from their accounts, from his wallet, and she ended up abandoning him and their family, including her children, which were his stepchildren. And and I mean, for the duration of the process that I represented him, we never heard back from her. We didn't know where she went. And I mean, that goes beyond the marital problems. I mean, abandoning the children, lying in order to get money, and that was, I think, one example. Another one can be when the spouse is withholding money so that you can get what you need, food, clothing, medicine, and and those are some of the cases that I've seen, especially in Minnesota, like people that lived out in the countryside, where they were really far away from town, and they had no means of transportation. no food, and no way to get medicine for their kids. It was a
Mhm.
really terrible situation. So
Yeah.
those are, so that's really cruel behavior that is, crossing the line from, just a bad marital problem to extreme cruelty.
Yeah. And I think that another example of that kind of extreme cruelty that we have seen in cases involving men as well as women is that if an abusive spouse or someone perpetrating extreme cruelty is consistently and routinely engaging in very degrading and abusive language against the other spouse, it's not like you're having a discussion and things sort of escalate and maybe people say some things that they later regret. It's not like that. It's like a situation where someone is continuously calling the other person very dehumanizing names,
Mhm.
saying very dehumanizing things about them to the point where it is really difficult for the person hearing those things not to begin to feel uh, dependent, diminished as a person in their capacity to live on their own and and it's a manner again of controlling the person. Using immigration status as a threat
Mhm.
is one
Yeah.
of the classic kind of tools that abusive people use against their victims, immigrant victims in particular. So if someone is experiencing threats, and or name calling about their immigration status, if they're being called, illegal routinely, if they're being called names that are degrading and dehumanizing, any sort of language like that that's being used as a routine matter and not just in moments of passion or moments of intense argument, but rather like on a regular, ongoing basis. That is definitely extreme cruelty.
Well, and that reminded me of a situation where there are normal arguments that then become very intense, and then so then there's some sort of disagreement, and they use their lack of immigration status, threaten to call ICE, take away their children or their ability to ever see their citizen children again.
Yeah,
So, a normal disagreement escalates into something where these threats are being made,
yeah,
where their
yeah.
families would be taken away.
Very common for an abusive person to use those kinds of threats against their victim. And I do want to iterate again that the legal system in the United States has gotten wise to that kind of behavior, thank God. And there is almost no likelihood that an abuser is going to actually be able to leverage the legal system in the United States to keep a person from seeing their kids. The United States family law system is extremely biased in favor of having children see their parents, to the point where even like parents with a proven track record of addiction, abuse, negligence are allowed to see their children if they want to, and they don't have their parental rights terminated, even when arguably it would be best for the child. I think courts are constantly trying to make that balancing act, but they would never remove children from a loving parent who wants to have a relationship with them if they can avoid it. They would never do that just because an abuser says that you're illegal or you're a bad parent or something like that. They're going to do a much deeper analysis of what is actually going on, and always err on the side of keeping families together if they can. So I want to encourage the men out there who are suffering in abusive relationships to, muster the strength and the courage to come forward and, allow yourself to ask for help. you can, in fact, get the stability and the security that you need on the immigration side of things if you're able to disclose these kinds of things and explain them with enough detail. You don't have to have police reports. There doesn't have to be physical violence. There are ways to prove extreme cruelty without a lot of secondary evidence. As we know, a lot of times these kinds of abusive situations happen behind closed doors, and there just isn't a lot of physical evidence. But the law has awareness of that, and there are ways to prove up your case, and be able to get the immigration status that you need in order to live your life and create a better situation for yourself. So is there anything else, Diego, that you would like to add before we sign off?
Well, I would say if there is physical violence, if you are in danger, please do call the police, call for help.
Absolutely.
The other thing I would say is that I understand that the fear of appearing weak or feeling weak in these kinds of situations, and getting information and knowing your options will empower you and will help you gain control of what seems like an uncontrollable situation. And that is why you should definitely seek help and legal counsel in these types of situations.
Definitely. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, everyone else. And if you need help with any kind of question regarding VAWA or any other type of immigration matter, please reach out to us at walkergatesvela.com. On our website, you can click directly to schedule an appointment with us on our calendar, or call our office and they will be happy to help get you scheduled with me, with Diego, or with any of our wonderful attorneys. We have a great team. All of us are very experienced in these types of cases, and we want to make sure every deserving immigrant has the opportunity to have legal status in the United States. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, we will sign off and see you again next week. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer.